Some people only see the mop in my hand, not the weight I carry in my bones. They laugh when I walk past, whisper when I scrub the floor. To them, I'm just the janitor, invisible, replaceable, but none of them know what I used to lift, what I still lift, what I'm about to lift. So when they called my name at that event, and the whole gym turned to see me walk up to the barbell, their smirks said everything. What happened next? Let's just say, my hands answered for me. They didn't know who I was. Hell, maybe I didn't even know anymore. It's funny how fast people forget. One day you're breaking records. The next you're cleaning floors no one bothers to look at. They just saw a short, quiet janitor with rough hands and busted knees. Didn't matter that I used to outlift guys twice my size. Didn't matter that my name once echoed in gyms across the country. Time has a way of erasing men like me. Men who don't brag. Men who build their legacy when no one's watching. I never asked for applause. Never needed a stage. But that doesn't mean I forgot what it feels like to lift something no one believes you can. I came from nothing. No fancy school, no big sponsorship, no crowd chanting my name. Just me. Cold mornings, cheap protein, and pain that felt more familiar than comfort. They laughed when I cleaned their mess. Left weights scattered on the floor like they were too good to re-rack. Dropped empty energy drink cans for me to sweep up, but I never said a word. I just watched, and I trained, alone, at night, while they slept and dreamed of medals they hadn't earned yet. So when I stepped up to that barbell, when they saw my name on the roster for the open lift, they thought it was a joke, but the weight wasn't laughing, and neither were my hands. So before we dive into what really happened that day, take a second to hit that like button, subscribe if you believe real strength comes from silence, and drop a comment below telling us what city and country you're watching from. Your story might just inspire someone else. Now, let me show you what they all missed. They see the mop, they see the uniform, but they never see me. Funny how that works. You wear a shirt with a name patch and suddenly you disappear. You're no longer a person. You're maintenance, you're janitor. You're the guy they call when someone throws up in the locker room or breaks a weight machine and walks away like nothing happened. What they don't see is what I've carried all these years. Most days I start before the sun comes up. By the time they show up with protein shakes and Bluetooth headphones, I've already swept the gym twice, cleaned the bathrooms, and re-racked half the weights they were too proud to put back the day before. No one says thank you. Not the staff, not the students, and definitely not the athletes. They walk past me like I'm part of the floor, step around me, sometimes through me, laugh loud on purpose, drop towels near my feet and pretend they didn't notice. Some even say stuff under their breath. Bet he sleeps in the supply closet. Dude probably tried to make the team back in '92 and never left. Bro's built like a lunchbox. What's he doing in a gym? I don't respond. I never do, because if I say something, I lose my job. But if I stay quiet long enough, they tell on themselves. One time, I caught 2 football players mocking me in the mirror while flexing. They didn't realize I was behind them sweeping the mats. I could have called them out. I could have told them what I used to lift, what I used to be, but what's the point? They wouldn't believe me. Hell, even I stopped believing it some days. But then something small happens, something that flips a switch, like last Tuesday. Some freshman tossed an empty pre-workout can across the gym and shouted, "Yo, clean guy." Didn't even look at me, just barked it like I was a dog. The can rolled toward my foot. I picked it up, and that's when I saw my reflection in the glass door. Calloused hands. Shoulders still broad under the faded uniform. Eyes that had seen everything, but weren't done yet. I stood there for a second longer than I should have. Because for a split moment, I saw the man I used to be, and that's when the whisper came back. That voice in my head I'd buried years ago. The one that spoke in plates and reps and cold steel bars. You're not done. It's strange the things you remember. I remembered my first state meet, Remembered chalk dust floating in the air like smoke, the way the barbell groaned under the weight, the way the crowd gasped when I pulled more than the guy 40 pounds heavier than me. I remembered winning, then I remembered losing everything. Life happens. Injuries, bills, real life. You trade in your belt for a broom. You stop chasing numbers and start chasing rent. But something in me never fully shut off. The engine still ran, low and quiet, like an old truck left idle in the cold. And in that moment, staring at myself in the reflection, I realized they don't see me because I stopped letting them. I faded, voluntarily. But that was about to change. Because I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their attention. I just needed one chance. One chance to step out of the shadow. Not to prove anything to them, but to remind me. And that chance was coming. They just didn't know it yet. There's a sound you never forget. Not a song. Not a voice. It's the sound of laughter aimed straight at you. Sharp. Cutting. Designed to hit where it hurts. That's what I heard the first time they decided to make me the joke of the gym. And it wasn't the last. It started small. Snickers when I walked by with a mop. They'd lower their voices just enough to pretend they weren't talking about me, but I could feel their eyes on my back, could feel their smiles growing. Then one day, one of them, a linebacker built like a wall, still in his practice jersey, cranked the volume up. "Yo, big man," he shouted across the gym. "Spot me real quick." "Oh wait, you can't lift, can you? Don't throw your back out on the bar." The room erupted. Even the ones who didn't laugh looked down and smirked. I froze for a second, not because I was scared, but because I knew I could walk over and outlift him with one arm tied behind my back. I didn't. I just lowered my eyes, tightened my grip on the mop, and kept moving. That's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't need fists to hit harder than a punch. The worst part wasn't the athletes. It was the way the others, trainers, staff, even the coach, let it slide. One afternoon, I was mopping near the locker room. A group of guys started flexing in the mirror, making faces at me while pretending to pose. One of them picked up a broom, mimicked my walk, and said, "Hey, check me out, future Mr. Clean champion." The others roared with laughter. And then the coach walked in. For a second, I thought he'd shut it down. Thought maybe someone in that room had the decency to say enough. But he just chuckled, slapped one of them on the shoulder and said, "Save your energy for the field, boys." That cut deeper than the joke, because when authority laughs with the bully, you learn fast you're completely alone. After that, it escalated. They started leaving weights scattered on purpose just so I'd have to bend down and pick them up. Sometimes they'd watch me re-rack their plates and say, "Careful, old man, don't break a sweat." One day while I was fixing a bench, one of them asked if I needed a senior discount at the gym. The others laughed so hard you'd think he just won a comedy award. I kept my head down. I always did. But inside, something was burning. The tipping point came when they filmed me. I was sweeping under the racks, quiet as always, when a phone camera popped up. Didn't think much of it until later when I heard my own name echoing in the hallway, followed by bursts of laughter. They had posted the video online, captioned it, "Strongest lift of the day, broom press." By dinner, the clip had made its rounds across the campus group chats. People I didn't even recognize were whispering and pointing when I walked by. I became the meme of the week, the janitor who thought he belonged in a gym. I could have walked out. Quit. Told myself I didn't deserve this. But I didn't. Because every laugh, every joke, every whisper didn't crush me. It sharpened me. Each insult was like adding another plate to the bar. And I'd been carrying heavy my whole damn life. They thought they were breaking me down. But what they didn't know was that they were waking something back up. At night, when the gym was empty, I'd walk past the racks of plates. Sometimes I'd stop, wrap my fingers around the cold steel, feel the familiar pull in my calloused palms. It reminded me of who I was before the mop, of the weight I once moved, of the man I used to be. And the laughter from the day didn't echo so loud anymore. It became fuel, because humiliation has two doors, one that leads to surrender and one that leads to fire. I knew exactly which one I was walking through, and the first person to regret underestimating me wasn't going to see it coming. The locker room has its own smell: sweat, disinfectant, cheap body spray. But there's another layer: the stench of arrogance. I walked in with my cart that day, mop rattling in the bucket, just doing my job. The place was loud, music blasting, athletes shouting over each other, the usual circus. And then, like always, the volume dipped when they saw me. That silence wasn't respect. It was the setup, because silence always comes before the punchline. "Yo, janitor," one of them barked, tossing a wet towel across the floor. It smacked against my shoe, leaving a dark stain. He grinned like he'd just scored a touchdown. I bent down, picked it up, didn't say a word, but the towel wasn't enough. They wanted more. "Hey, old man," another chimed in. "Bet you used to be somebody, huh? State champ of mopping floors?" Laughter, loud, sharp. It bounced off the metal lockers like slaps to the face. One kid grabbed a dumbbell, crouched low, and mimicked me pushing my mop, groaning as if it were too heavy. The others roared. I felt my fists tighten around the handle of the cart. My knuckles went white. They had no idea. No idea what I used to lift. No idea the weight my hands had known. And for a second I wanted to show them, but I didn't. Not yet. Then it happened. A linebacker with a shaved head and a smirk dripping with cruelty walked up. He was taller than me, broader, the kind of kid who thought size was everything. He held a protein shake in one hand and looked me dead in the eye. "You missed a spot," he said. And then, without breaking eye contact, poured the entire shake on the floor right where I had just mopped. The liquid splattered across my shoes, sticky, cold. The room exploded with laughter, and in that instant something inside me cracked. Because there's only so many times you can swallow your pride before it burns on the way down. I froze, not because I was scared, but because the silence in my head was louder than the noise around me. I remembered my past, the medals, the records, the barbell bending under my grip, the roar of a crowd. When I pulled weight no one thought humanly possible. And here I was, being mocked for scrubbing floors. The two versions of me collided in that second, the champion, the janitor. And for the first time in years, I didn't know which one would come out. I wanted to lift that kid by his collar and pin him against the lockers. Wanted to let my hands do the talking right there. But then the coach walked in. For one fleeting second, I thought salvation had arrived. Maybe this time he'd stop it. Maybe this time someone would say, "Enough." Instead, he looked at the mess, at the sticky puddle under my feet, and at the athletes laughing. And then, he laughed too, clapped the linebacker on the back and said, "Don't give him too much work, boys." My stomach twisted, not from shame, not even from anger, but from clarity. I realized in that moment, there would never be anyone to stand up for me. No whistle, no order, no savior. If I wanted respect, if I wanted silence, if I wanted them to choke on their own words, I would have to earn it back, with my own two hands. At night, when the gym emptied and the echo of sneakers faded, I stayed behind. Not because I had to, but because the silence called me. I'd push my cart into the dark corners, mop bucket rattling, until I reached the old storage room near the back. A room no one cared about anymore. Dust on the doorframe, rust on the hinges, but inside, that's where I kept myself. Because not everything you bury stays dead. I slid the door open. The smell of iron hit me first. Old weights, forgotten, stacked like relics. In the far corner, hidden under rags and broken mats, lay my box. Not much to look at. Just a beat-up trunk, corners dented, lid barely holding together. But inside was a past nobody here would ever believe. I lifted the lid, careful, like I was touching a wound. There it was. A cracked leather lifting belt. A faded competition singlet, red once, now closer to rust. And folded neatly at the bottom, my banner. State Powerlifting Champion, 1989. I ran my hand over the letters, feeling each stitch like a scar. To them, I was just the janitor. But once, I was the strongest man in any room I entered. I remembered the first time chalk dust filled my lungs, the barbell biting into my palms, the roar of a crowd I thought would never stop. Back then, they called me a freak, not because of my size, but because I didn't need it. I was short, stocky, not built like the giants. Yet I outlifted every single one of them. Pound for pound, I was untouchable. They said I was born to lift. But the truth, I wasn't born with anything. I built it, rep by rep, hour by hour, alone. And then, I let it all slip away. Life has a way of stripping you down. Injuries, bills, responsibilities, people depending on you. You blink and the records gather dust while you push a broom for rent money. But standing in that room, staring at that banner, I remembered something I'd almost forgotten. I was still me. The blood, the muscle, the fire. It never left. It was just waiting for me to pick it back up. I strapped on the belt, loose now, cracked from years in storage. Pulled the singlet out, pressed it against my chest. It smelled of chalk and sweat, the kind of smell that sticks to memory. For a moment, I wasn't Ed the janitor. I was Ed Coan, the lifter. The kid who had shocked a whole state by deadlifting what men twice his size couldn't budge. The echoes came back. Crowds chanting, bars bending, my name in lights, if only for a short while. And then, like a cruel joke, the laughter of the locker room that day bled back into my head. The mocking. The protein shake spilled at my feet, the towel, the coach's smirk. The two worlds clashed inside me, the legend I once was, and the nobody they saw. And for the first time in years, I realized they weren't going to hand me respect. I'd have to take it, with my own hands. I put everything back in the trunk, shut the lid. But I didn't lock it this time. I left it open like a wound exposed to the air, because I knew this wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a promise. The same hands that pushed a mop could still crush steel, and the same silence they mocked me for would one day silence them. I grabbed the mop handle again, walked out of the storage room, and returned to the empty gym. But something had changed. I wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. Every sweep, every push, every grip was training. Every drop of sweat was fuel. Every insult was another plate on the bar. And when the time came, when I finally stepped onto that platform again, they would learn the truth the hard way. Because chalk might fade, but strength never dies. The gym is a circus during the day. Music blasting, weights slamming, egos bigger than the mirrors. But at night, it's different. Empty, quiet, honest. That's when I trained. Because some battles are fought where no one's watching. I'd wait until the last athlete left, the last coach signed off, the last light flicked out in the locker room. Then, when it was just me and the ghosts of iron, I'd stay. No playlist, no hype crew, no cameras. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of my breath. I'd strip off the uniform, roll up my sleeves, and chalk my hands. The same hands they mocked for being dirty, now gripping steel again. The first time I wrapped my fingers around that bar after years away, my palms burned, calluses split, my back screamed, but I smiled, because pain meant I was alive again. I started light, plates they'd laugh at, but every rep was war, not against the weight, but against the voice inside me that whispered, "You're done." I didn't just train my body, I trained my silence. Every grunt swallowed, every ache buried. Nobody knew, nobody cared. But that's what made it mine. And the more I trained, the more I noticed something. The insults from the day didn't sting the same anymore. They became fuel. Every laugh was another rep. Every joke was another set. By the time I hit my 3rd week of secret training, I was pulling numbers the football team couldn't dream of. And they had no idea. Sometimes, in the middle of a set, I'd hear footsteps in the hall. My heart would race. I'd picture one of them walking in, catching me in the act. I almost wanted it to happen. Wanted them to see me grinding in the dark. Wanted them to ask, "What the hell are you doing?" Because the answer would have been simple. Becoming the man you'll never forget. But no one ever came. And maybe that was better. The night stretched on. I'd train until sweat soaked through my shirt, until my arms trembled, until I had to crawl to the mop closet just to hide the evidence. The next morning I'd show up early, uniform pressed, mop in hand, same as always. No one suspected a thing. And when they mocked me, I bit my tongue. Because I knew something they didn't. I was loading plates they'd never touch. I was waking muscles they thought were dead. I was carving a man out of silence. There was one night I'll never forget. The bar was loaded heavy, heavier than it had been in years. I stood over it, heart hammering, sweat dripping down my forehead. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if I tore something? What if I collapsed? What if I proved them right? But then I heard their laughter again, the protein shake spilling at my feet, the towel, the word janitor dripping like venom. I bent down, gripped the bar, and pulled. The weight fought me. My legs shook, back arched, veins bulged. The bar bent, groaned, and for a second it felt like gravity itself was laughing at me. But inch by inch I rose, until the plates cleared the floor, until I stood tall, chest out, holding steel in the silence of an empty gym. No crowd, no applause, just me and the bar. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. And I knew this secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. It was just another Tuesday morning. Another day of sweeping sweat off the floors, wiping down benches, hauling trash bags heavier than some of the kids' deadlifts. But then I saw it. A flyer taped to the gym door, flapping in the draft. Bright red letters across the top. Campus powerlifting open, anyone can enter. My hands froze on the mop. Because sometimes fate doesn't knock, it slaps you in the face. I tore the flyer down and read it again. Bench press, squat, deadlift. Open to all students, staff, and community members. I could feel my heart pounding. It had been years since I stepped onto a platform. Years since chalk coated my hands in front of a crowd. But here it was, an invitation. Not meant for me, but waiting all the same. The rules didn't care if I was a janitor. The weights didn't care if I pushed a broom. Steel only asks one question. Can you lift me? And I knew the answer. The rest of the day I couldn't focus. Every time someone laughed, every time a kid dropped a dumbbell and left it for me, I thought about the bar bending in my hands. By lunch, the decision was made. I signed my name on the entry sheet. Just 3 letters. Ed. The pen pressed so hard the paper nearly tore. When the athletes saw it, they burst out laughing. No way, one snorted. The janitor's competing? Another pulled out his phone. This is gold. The internet's gonna love this. By the end of the day, word spread across campus. The janitor had entered the lifting meet, and the joke was already writing itself. At dinner, I heard whispers echoing from a table of athletes. Dude, imagine him trying to squat. His knees are dust. Bet he won't even show up. Nah, he'll show. These old guys love attention. It'll be hilarious. They didn't understand. I wasn't chasing attention. I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing silence, the kind that comes when a room full of doubters runs out of words. And silence was worth more than any medal. That night when the gym emptied again, I trained harder than ever. Not reckless, precise. Every rep logged, every set calculated. I wasn't just preparing to lift weights. I was preparing to lift the weight of their mockery. The weight of every year I'd been invisible. I could see it in my head already. The stage, the bar, the spotlight. and the look on their faces when the janitor's hands answered the only way they knew how. But doubt creeps in even when you don't invite it. What if I failed? What if my body betrayed me after all these years? What if I gave them exactly what they wanted? A spectacle? A joke? Another viral clip? Those questions haunted me with every set. But then I remembered something. I'd lived my whole life proving people wrong. Too small, too quiet, too average. And yet time after time I'd pulled more weight than men built like tanks. This wasn't new, it was just louder. And I'd never been afraid of noise. The day of the meet crept closer. Flyers hung everywhere now. And every time I saw one, I felt my blood heat. Some athletes made bets on how fast I'd fail. Others joked about bringing a mop to the event so I could clean up after myself. But I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. Because the loudest thing in the world isn't laughter. It's the sound of a barbell hitting the floor after you've done what they swore you couldn't. And that sound was coming. Soon. They thought it was a game. For them, the upcoming meet was just another excuse to flex on Instagram, to film sets with filters, to chase likes instead of discipline. But for me, it was war. And wars aren't won with hashtags. Their prep looked like this. Selfies in the locker room, protein shake reviews, videos captioned, "Getting huge for the meet." My prep looked different. Cold showers at 5 a.m., eggs, rice, beans, and water. No excuses, no cameras, just silence. I kept my meals simple, my schedule tighter than a drum. While they stayed up scrolling through their followers' comments, I went to bed early, body sore but mind locked in. Discipline isn't glamorous. It doesn't get likes. But it wins battles. The weights became my allies. I spoke to them in sweat, in pain, in silence. Every night after mopping, I trained until my hands shook, until my breath came out ragged. The chalk dust became my smoke. The plates clanging became my war drums. I taped my knees, strapped on my belt, and lifted until the bar bent like a bow. No one cheered. No one watched. But in that emptiness, I found clarity. Because the crowd doesn't matter. The stage doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the man who refuses to break. And I refused. Meanwhile, I couldn't ignore the whispers during the day. "Yo, janitor, you practicing with that mop? Better bring a walker to the meet, old man. Somebody record it. This is gonna be comedy gold." I didn't answer, didn't flinch. But every word was a nail in the coffin I was building for their pride. They were too blind to see it. They thought I was entering their world. But the truth? They had stepped into mine. Because when the barbell is loaded heavy, filters don't save you, strength does. I remembered the greats I'd studied, the mantras I lived by. Consistency beats talent, work beats hype, silence beats noise, and I lived it. Every rep, every step, every drop of sweat. One night I loaded the bar heavier than ever before. My body screamed. My back threatened to give, but I locked in and pulled. The weight hovered, every muscle fiber on fire. Then it rose, inch by inch, until I stood tall, the steel trembling in my hands. I didn't yell, didn't celebrate. I just lowered it, knelt on the floor, and whispered to myself, "They don't know what's coming." Because the truth was simple. They weren't preparing for me. They were preparing for each other. And I wasn't preparing for them. I was preparing for war. Days before the meet, I watched them post their final videos, lifting with half range, bouncing bars, screaming for clout. Their friends hyped them up in the comments. I smiled quietly, wiping down the mirrors after they left. Because I knew hype fades, noise fades, but strength stays. When the morning of the meet drew near, I woke before sunrise. My uniform still hung in the closet, pressed and ready for another day of cleaning. But beside it, on a chair, I laid out something else. My belt, my shoes, my chalk. I wasn't going in as the janitor anymore. I was going in as the man I'd always been. And when they saw me step onto that platform, they wouldn't be laughing. Because I wasn't prepping for a meet. I was prepping to bury their arrogance. The day of the meet felt colder than usual. Not the weather outside, the air inside the gym. It carried something sharper than chill. Anticipation, mockery, the scent of a crowd waiting for blood. I walked in wearing the same shoes I used to mop their sweat. My belt tucked under my arm, chalk in a plastic bag. Nothing flashy, nothing to prove. But as soon as my name was called on the roster, the laughter erupted. And laughter, when it's aimed at you, echoes louder than any applause. They whispered at first, then said it out loud. No way he's serious. Yo, somebody record this. We're about to get meme gold. Watch him throw his back out just stepping on stage. Phones lit up like stars. Dozens of little screens pointed at me, ready to capture the janitor's big fall. I didn't look at them. I looked at the bar. Cold steel. Waiting. It didn't laugh. It didn't mock. It just waited for an answer. The athletes strutted around in matching gear, their friends hyping them up, coaches clapping their backs. They had chalk smeared like war paint, headphones blasting hype music. And me? Silence. I sat alone on a bench, staring at my hands, calloused, cracked, tired. The same hands that had pushed mops for years. The same hands that had once broken records. They didn't know which version they were about to meet. And honestly, neither did I. When they announced my first attempt, the laughter grew louder. He's really gonna do it. This is insane. Yo, janitor, don't hurt yourself. I walked toward the platform. Each step felt heavier, not because of the weight, but because of the eyes. Hundreds of them, all waiting to see me fail. I gripped the bar. It was lighter than the ghosts I'd carried for years. The first pull wasn't for records. It wasn't for them. It was for me. And when the plates left the floor, the laughter died for just a second. Because doubt sounds a lot like silence when you prove it wrong. I lowered the bar and stepped back. The referees nodded. A clean lift. The crowd muttered, confused. That wasn't supposed to happen. The janitor wasn't supposed to lift it. Phones kept recording. But now the captions weren't so clear. Some laughed still, saying it was a fluke. Others whispered, "Wait, did he actually just pull that?" I walked off the stage, calm. My heart wasn't. It thundered in my chest. But I didn't show it. Because in war, you never show the enemy your nerves. The next round of attempts came. Athletes missed lifts they'd bragged about for weeks. Bars crashed to the floor. Coaches shook their heads. And then my name came up again. The whispers turned sharp. No way he hits this. All right, this is where it ends. Get ready. Here comes the fail. I stepped back onto the platform. The weight was stacked higher. The bar bent just sitting there. I bent down, wrapped my fingers around the steel, and breathed. Not just air, memories, pain, years of silence. I pulled. The weight fought back. My legs shook, my back screamed. The crowd leaned in, ready to laugh when I broke, but inch by inch the bar rose, until I stood tall again. The gym went quiet. Phones still filmed, but now no one was laughing. Because laughter is easy. Silence. Silence is dangerous. And that silence was only the beginning. The third attempt. The one that separates lifters from dreamers. The one that shuts mouths. Or confirms every laugh. When they loaded the bar, it groaned. Plates stacked like walls on each side. Steel bending under its own weight. I heard someone in the crowd whisper, "He's gonna die under that." Another voice chuckled, "This is where the janitor's show ends." But I didn't hear them after that. Because the only thing that mattered was the bar. And the bar doesn't lie. I stepped forward, each stride deliberate. The lights overhead burned into my skin, sweat already rolling down my temple. My hands twitched, craving chalk. I dipped them in the bowl, rubbed the white dust into my calluses, and for a moment it felt like I was 20 years younger. The crowd leaned closer, phones angled, ready for the fail of the year. I wrapped my fingers around the bar. Cold, unforgiving, heavy. My breath slowed. In, out, in. This wasn't about showing off. This was about revenge. Not against them, but against every year I'd spent invisible. The command came. Lift. I pulled. The weight didn't budge. For half a second I felt panic bite the back of my neck. Whispers rose. Laughter started to bubble. Then I dug deeper. Past the fear, past the pain, past the janitor uniform. My legs shook. My back threatened to snap. But the plates rattled. The bar moved. 1 inch, 2 inches. The room went quiet. I clenched harder, veins bursting in my arms. The steel bent like it was alive, fighting me. My chest roared with fire. My vision blurred. But I kept pulling. And suddenly, the weight left the ground. The silence was suffocating. No cheers, no laughter, just shock. I locked my knees back straight, standing tall with more weight in my hands than most of them had ever touched. For a heartbeat, I wasn't a janitor. I was Ed Coan again, the kid who defied physics, the man who made steel obey. I held it longer than I needed to, not for the judges, but for them. So every smirk, every insult, every phone recording could see the truth. Then I dropped it. The crash thundered across the gym, and that sound crushed their laughter better than any word ever could. The crowd froze, mouths open, eyes wide, phones shaking in hands that had expected comedy, not history. Somebody whispered, "What the hell?" Another stammered, "Who is he?" The coach, the same man who had laughed with the bullies, leaned forward in disbelief. They had written my story in their heads. The janitor makes a fool of himself, but I had just rewritten it in steel. I stepped off the platform, my body on fire, chest heaving. My legs wanted to collapse, but my eyes stayed forward, my expression calm. I didn't need to smile, didn't need to celebrate. The silence was enough, because silence is what happens when reality slaps harder than arrogance. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They had seen strength, they had seen power, but they hadn't yet seen the cost. Every lift takes something from you. Every victory leaves a scar. And while they gawked at what I had just done, none of them understood the truth. I wasn't just lifting weight. I was lifting years of humiliation, years of invisibility, years of being the joke, and every pound of it pressed against my bones. How long could I carry it? How long before it broke me? Because karma doesn't just crush them, it tests you too. Silence is strange. It's heavier than noise, sharper than laughter. And when I dropped that bar, silence drowned the entire room. No cheers, no jeers. Just the sound of their pride choking in their throats. And that silence was louder than anything I had ever heard. I stood there, chalk covering my hands, chest heaving, eyes forward. Not a word, not a smile, because I didn't need to speak. The weight had spoken for me. I looked out over the crowd, faces pale, eyes wide. The same mouths that had mocked me now struggled to close. One kid's phone was still pointed at me, but his hand shook so much the camera looked drunk. Another lowered his arm completely, ashamed to even keep recording. Even the coach, the man who had laughed when they humiliated me. He leaned forward now, brows furrowed, whispering something under his breath. He didn't see a janitor anymore. He saw a storm he couldn't control. I walked off the platform slowly, every step echoing louder than the crash of the plates. My legs wanted to buckle, my back screamed, but my head stayed high. For once, no one dared block my path. The same athletes who had thrown towels at me now stepped aside. It felt like walking through a different world, one where the rules had shifted. But here's the truth. It wasn't their world that changed, it was mine, and I had forced them to see it. Whispers rippled through the bleachers. Who is he? Did you see that bar bend? There's no way a janitor just did that. Someone muttered my name. Not janitor, not clean guy. My real name, Ed. It hung in the air like a secret finally exposed. Because the moment people say your name differently, they never see you the same again. But silence doesn't stay silence forever. The noise crept back in, but it wasn't laughter this time. It was disbelief, confusion, uneasy claps from a few brave hands in the back. Not celebration, more like fear disguised as respect. And that was enough for me, because I hadn't come here for applause. I came here for that pause. That exact second when every doubt froze and every insult turned to ash. As I sat down, sweat dripping into my eyes, I thought about everything that had led here. The mop, the locker room, the spilled protein shake, the whispers. Every insult had brought me to this silence. Every laugh had carried me to this moment. And I realized I wouldn't trade any of it. Because without the mockery, there'd be no war. And without the war, there'd be no victory. Still, part of me wondered, was this enough? Had I proven my point? Or was the real test still waiting? I flexed my fingers, chalk cracking off my skin. My body trembled, but my mind sharpened. Because karma isn't just about payback, it's about revelation. And what I revealed to them was simple. The man they thought was invisible had just become unforgettable. But they hadn't seen the end. Not yet. Walking off that platform, I could feel the difference before I even turned around. The stares weren't the same. No more smirks. No more sideways glances. For the first time in years, they weren't looking through me. They were looking at me. And once the eyes lock on you, there's no going back to being invisible. I sat down slow, my hands still trembling from the pull. Chalk cracked off my knuckles as I wiped sweat on my faded pants. The crowd didn't know how to act. Phones hovered, but no one wanted to narrate anymore. Whispers spread instead. Who is he? No way a janitor just did that. I've seen videos of a guy named Ed, but they couldn't finish the thought. The same athletes who once hurled towels at me now sat stiff, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. Their laughter was gone, replaced by something else. Shame, confusion, maybe even fear. I looked straight at them. Not with a smile, not with anger, just steady. And they dropped their eyes first. That's how you know respect has started to grow. Not when they cheer, but when they can't hold your gaze. Then I heard it. My name. Not janitor, not old man, but my real name spoken in fragments, whispered from the back rows. Ed. Wait, Ed Coan? No, that can't be him. I didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. But the sound of it filled the room like thunder rolling in. Some of them had seen the name buried in record books, maybe a footnote on a YouTube highlight reel. To them, Ed Coan was a story from decades ago, not a man scrubbing their floors. And yet, here I was, a ghost from their textbooks, alive, breathing and bending steel right in front of their eyes. The coach finally broke. He stood up, arms crossed, trying to mask the shake in his voice. "Where'd you learn to pull like that?" he asked. I let the silence linger long enough for everyone to lean in. Then I looked at him, then at the mop propped against the wall. "Same place I learned to push that," I said. The room rippled with unease. Some laughed nervously, others stared. But I kept my face calm, because the truth didn't need to be explained. Strength speaks for itself. One of the younger athletes approached me afterward, eyes wide. "Sir, did you used to compete?" he asked. I met his gaze and shrugged. "Once." That one word was heavier than any bar I'd lifted that day, because it told them everything without giving them anything. And they knew. They had overlooked a man who once carried a crown they couldn't even dream of touching. The rest of the meet blurred. Other athletes lifted, coaches shouted, but nothing sounded the same. Because once the room has seen what they never expected, the spotlight never leaves you, not even when you're sitting in the corner, quiet, tying your old shoes. They wanted to talk to me now, They wanted to ask questions, but I wasn't giving them the satisfaction. Respect isn't built in words, it's built in silence. And as the event drew to a close, I realized something simple. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their recognition. What I needed was already mine, the knowledge that they'd never look at me the same again. Because once someone truly sees you, you can never become invisible again. And that was victory enough. But the story wasn't over, because the heaviest weight wasn't the one on the bar, it was the one I still carried inside me. The meet ended the way it began, with noise. Judges calling last attempts, plates slamming to the floor, coaches yelling at kids who couldn't lock out their lifts. But for me, all of it faded, because nothing could drown out the sound I had already heard. The silence of a room that finally saw me. I packed my things slowly, no rush. My belt, my chalk, my shoes, old gear, worn thin, but still stronger than all their new toys combined. Around me, athletes whispered. Some pointed, some kept staring. A few even clapped when I walked past, hesitant and awkward, like they were trying to cover the shame of mocking me hours earlier. But applause never mattered. I didn't come here for their hands. I came here for their eyes, and their eyes couldn't look away anymore. The coach avoided me, pretended to be busy talking to the judges, flipping through papers, but I caught him glancing at me, jaw tight, like he was chewing on regret. He didn't say a word, and that was fine, because what could he possibly say? Sorry? Too late. Good job? Worthless. Words were just air. But silence was gold. On my way out, one of the same athletes who had filmed me sweeping floors stopped me. "Sir, Ed, right?" His voice cracked. "I just wanted to say, respect." I didn't know. I looked at him, really looked. He had no idea what that word meant. Respect isn't in what you say. It's in what you do when no one's looking. So I nodded once, short and sharp, and kept walking. Because his words weren't for me. They were for him, to ease the sting of his own shame. And I wasn't here to heal them. Outside, the night air felt colder, cleaner. I walked across the parking lot, each step echoing like the weights I had dropped inside. I thought about the journey. The locker room humiliation, the spilled shake, the laughter that once burned like acid. And I smiled. Not because I had beaten them, but because I had beaten myself. The doubt, the invisibility, the years of silence. All of it was gone. They had tried to bury me in mockery, but I had used it as chalk, and chalk never disappears completely. It lingers in the air, reminding everyone of what was lifted. When I reached my car, I set the belt on the passenger seat. It looked small there, old leather, frayed edges, the ghost of battles long past. But tonight, it wasn't just a relic, it was proof. Proof that no matter how deep you sink, the fire never really dies. It just waits for the right weight to wake it up again. I thought about tomorrow, about walking back into that gym with my uniform on, mop in hand, same job, same silence. Would they laugh again? Maybe. People always try, but it wouldn't matter, because now they knew. Now they'd think twice. Now every time they looked at me, they'd remember the night the janitor bent steel and left the room gasping, and that memory would weigh heavier than any barbell. I didn't need a medal, didn't need a trophy, didn't need their applause. All I needed was the silence I earned, the silence that followed me like a shadow, louder than every insult combined. Because when you answer with your hands, no one forgets. And as the doors closed behind me that night, the world didn't hear the roar of applause. Instead, they heard the lingering echo of silence, a silence forged in sweat, scars, and redemption. I walked away carrying nothing but an old leather belt, a battered uniform, and something stronger. The unshakable certainty that I'd reclaimed my own worth. They saw me, Not as a janitor, not as a joke, but as a man whose hands had answered when words would fail. In the end, I never needed their applause. I never needed their approval. Because silent strength speaks louder than any cheer. And once they finally saw me, I was never invisible again. Remember, when you start to treat the lightweights like heavyweights, the heavyweights will go up a lot easier. A lesson from the real Ed Coan, whispered by the character itself, proving that every small, deliberate effort builds the foundation for monumental change.